Frederick Douglass is an example of somebody who's done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice.
Now, for the record, Frederick Douglass died in 1895 and was so widely recognized before his death that, according to one historian, he was actually the most photographed man of his time. Wow. And nope, Mike Pence. Abraham Lincoln has President's Day. You try again next year. But that's all just history. Back here in the present, we've got some idea of the president's approach to an African-American policy agenda tucked away in that draft executive order that would bar any immigrants who might need public assistance like Medicaid. There's a line ordering a report on how the money saved from blocking those immigrants could be invested in, quote, inner city communities and disadvantaged youth. In other words, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or more accurately, robbing poor immigrants to pay poor African Americans. And back with me is Teray, and joining me now, Wade Henderson of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and Human Rights, Bruce LeVell of the National Diversity Coalition for Trump, and Alicia Garza, co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Thank you all for being here. Wade, I'm going to start with you on this.
Thanks.
This idea of trying to entice African Americans by saying, we will take from these poor immigrants and give to your communities. Your thoughts?
It's really disgusting, Joy. You know, alternative facts are now the new watchword of the Trump administration, so it's not surprising that the real Donald Trump might discover the real Frederick Douglass, and at least a one-sided bromance might begin. But this idea of taking the most famous Republican of the 19th century, second only to Abraham Lincoln, and pairing him with the newly famous Republican of the 21st century simply won't work. The idea that immigrants who are now qualified for Medicaid might somehow be cheating the system is simply totally bogus. You now have asylees and refugees, that is, people who've applied for asylum and refugee status that qualify for Medicaid or the Child Health Insurance Program, but there are restrictions on most immigrants for up to 5 years before they could qualify, and even then, those who sponsor them are ultimately responsible in the event that they wrongly get government benefits. What's really the problem, though, is that Trump is focusing on distractions rather than the issues at hand. And both because of his statements and his recent appointments, the Trump administration has become, in my view, a clear and present danger to African Americans' constitutional right to vote. And I can cite 3 examples. The first is his remark about the massive fraud that occurred in the election, which is total nonsense. Second, his appointment of Jeff Sessions to head the Department of Justice, given his history, speaks for itself. And now the appointment or the nomination of Neil Gorsuch for a seat on the Supreme Court is deeply troubling. Before he was appointed to the court, Gorsuch worked as the principal deputy of the Associate Attorney General in the Justice Department, responsible for supervising voting rights litigation. And in 2005, he intervened in a case involving the Georgia voter ID law and prevented career attorneys from bringing a case in a dubious and bogus way. That issue needs to be examined closely, and it was not looked at before he was appointed to the court.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up, because we do need to come back and talk a lot more about Jefferson Sessions. But I want to come back to this this notion of pitting immigrants. And by the way, a lot of immigrants are black, but pitting immigrants, non-white immigrants, and African Americans against each other. And Bruce, I want to play for you a couple of the ways in which Donald Trump has spoken to and about African Americans and get your response. Let's play Donald Trump back in August of 2016, speaking before a white crowd in Dimondale, Michigan, but speaking about black people.
The improved refugee screening standards I have proposed will save countless billions of dollars. We will invest a portion of the money saved in a jobs program for inner city youth.
Okay, and now let's listen to that same month, Donald Trump speaking to African Americans, speaking about African Americans again at that same rally and saying what Hillary Clinton would do versus himself.
Hillary Clinton would rather provide a job to a refugee from overseas than to give that job to unemployed African-American youth in cities like Detroit.
So, Bruce, do you have any discomfort whatsoever with this rhetoric of trying to pit refugees, people are coming here seeking asylum, and African Americans against each other, not to mention doing it in front of an all-white audience?
Well, thanks, Joy. Thanks for having me. And
sure.
The Falcons will win Sunday, by the way, just for the record. Well, I disagree, and I will tell you this: there's nothing wrong with the president wanting to put America first. He has been, no president, for example, in the inauguration speech has been so direct in terms of speaking and caring about the African American community.
Wait, what did he say that
speech.
talked about caring about the African? I mean, that was a dark and dour speech. I didn't hear anything about caring for the African American community.
Trying to finish, respectfully, the Democrat regime for many, many years have promised the same old, and has never accomplished anything.
Okay,
so to speak
Bruce,
directly to a system that hasn't had any help except a bunch of false promises, I think it's a fair call to say, hey, well, let's put America first and put more infrastructure and resources in our inner city communities. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so first of all, just as a point of order, we say Democratic because that's the name of the party here. We don't use the pejorative, right? We just say Democratic. But what in Donald Trump's inauguration speech? I mean, I remember it was pretty short, it was pretty dour. Did he say that talked about caring for African American communities?
Well, to stop the murder rate, for example, Joy. I mean, it's out of control.
Crime is what he said,
we have 662 murders in the 2016 in Chicago alone. To speak and say, hey, enough's enough, stop killing our black kids and our children and communities. That's no president has ever spoke like that in an inauguration, to speak directly and have care about our children in our inner cities, especially in the African American community. I think that's humongous. That's huge.
Wow. Okay, let's let Alicia Garza respond to that. Did you find that to be caring and positive toward the African American community, that kind of rhetoric, Alicia?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, yeah, that would be me. To be honest with you, I think that what it was actually condescending. And I do think that black communities across the country and throughout the world can see right through this kind of rhetoric. Let's be clear that immigrants aren't the ones who are reshaping the economy. It's corporations who have reshaped the economy and made it so that there is a crisis in joblessness. There's also a crisis in terms of driving wages and the quality of work. It's a race to the bottom. So I didn't find it at all in any way did I find there to be any kind of concern from Donald Trump about black communities. And let's be very clear, he hasn't been concerned about black communities except to criminalize them. We haven't forgotten about the Central Park Five. We haven't forgotten about the comments that Donald Trump has made about black people. And I can't quite wrap my head around how it is that there can be people defending his record in the black community when he actually doesn't have one.
And Teray,
I'm sorry. You talk about America first. I'm American. I've never lived anywhere else, right? My family is fully American. I don't feel embraced by this. I don't feel anyone saying, we're looking out for my interests. When the president is out tweeting about Milo's right to speak at Berkeley, but then he's attacking John Lewis's right to speak and Hamilton's right to speak, I don't feel America first. I feel a certain America first. This attack on black crime in Chicago, this is not the prime thing that black America needs dealt with. We need the war on drugs dealt with. We need the wealth inequality dealt with. We need public schooling better. We need policing violence dealt with better. He's dealing with some black people, and 40% of the murders are committed by 0.5%, but some black people are killing others in Chicago. No recognition that the murder rate in Chicago is about half of what it was 20 years ago. So that is actually a massive success story in terms of the long-term history of Chicago. But all we hear is about, as Alicia referenced, our criminality, right? Our problematic nature for the nation. Does America first include me?
Yeah, and well, Bruce, your response to that?
Well, like you said before, for a president to come out and be so profound on the inauguration speech, to speak directly into
but you're not answering what Teray said. Okay, but no, because Bruce, we only have a limited amount of time, and if you're going to give a speech, I need you to answer what Teray just said.
Well, the president's made it very clear about the money he wants to put in a lot of these particular communities.
How much money
that hasn't been done before. And to mention, we've only been 2 weeks, the president's been 2 weeks into his presidency and has moved mountains.
What mountains has he moved? What mountains has he moved?
Well, the money that's going to come into these communities, which he is going to do in terms of.
No, but sir, what money? You're inventing money that you don't have any factual backup for.
Well,
what money?
The way it works is when you remove resources from other countries and other resources and put it back into America's interest, we have money. Instead of pouring trillions of dollars into wars, which
Bruce,
he spoke against,
thank you for being
and
here,
putting it back into America and not into foreign affairs. When you lower the tax rate from a small business owner like myself from 37% to 16, 17%,
Has he proposed
where I
to
can
do that?
create more jobs and create more jobs in the community. Those are very strong messages that's going to help and resonate the American people.
Okay, Bruce, we're out of time. Donald Trump has not proposed any of that. So I just want to get our viewers to understand that, just when you hear things on TV, you're going to hear people say things that may be what Bruce would like to have happen. Those proposals are not on the table. They have not been proposed. No, they have not. They have not. I mean, I spent all day covering Donald Trump. All right, but anyway, thank you for coming. Teray's going to stick around.
Thank
Wade
you.
Henderson, Bruce LeVell, Alicia Garza. Thank you all for being here. All right, coming up at noon.